Hello, and welcome to the Vicars Watch Dibbly, the podcast where real priests talk about pop culture and what we've learned about faith, life and the church. We've watched Dibbly, now we're watching everything else. I'm Kate.
I'm Ruthi, and today we are watching Bridget Jones's Diary. We're going back to the original 2001 film as the new one's coming out now, and we talk about Bridget Jones's experience as a single woman, comparisons that we've had in the workplace with the sexism that she endures, and the connection with Jane Austen. Happy hello to you.
Hello.
We're in our vicarages. You're listening in. We're ready and raring to talk about Bridget Jones's Diary. But first, we should probably explain. It's just me and Kate today.
Hello.
We've ditched Ross.
Yeah. Watching a girly movie. And Ross is on holiday.
Yeah, Ross is on holiday, has a new nephew, which is very exciting. So he's busy having cuddles. And so it's just me and Kate today, and we're going to talk about Bridget Jones's Diary. So the original is it a trilogy now, or is it four?
No, it's four movies. It's quartet.
Quartet. There's a new movie coming out, which is Mad About the Boy, is it called? So because we're a retro podcast, we're going back to the original and the best. I don't know, have you watched all the Bridget Jones's Diaries?
I've always found Bridget Jones a little bit cringe. So I have definitely watched the first one, and I know I watched the second one. I don't think I watched Edge of Reason. No, Edge of Reason is second.
Yeah.
I don't think I watched the third one, whatever that's called.
It's the one with the baby, isn't it?
Oh,
Bridget Jones's
Bridget
Baby?
Jones's Baby, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a new one, Mad About the Boy. So we're going back to the original and chatting about that today. So, Kate, do you have any facts for us about the original film when it came out, or that kind of thing?
Bridget Jones's Diary is a 2001 romantic comedy. It stars Renee Zellweger as the eponymous. I love that word.
Oh, good
Jones. Word. And then there's two male leads played by Colin Firth and Hugh Grant. It is loosely inspired by Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Inspired so much by the 1990s BBC adaptation that they were very clear that they wanted Colin Firth to play Mark Darcy.
Oh, really? Interesting.
It is another Richard Curtis collaboration, based on, I think, a novel by Helen Fielding.
Yes.
Which I think is supposed to be semi-autobiographical, but I'm not sure.
The fact I know about the book is that it was the best-selling book of the 90s. And I only know that from watching Big Fat Quiz of the 90s. And that was the answer at the end, because it's one of my favourite clips of that, the whole show, the Big Fat Quiz series, because Mr. Blobby comes on to ask the question about the best-selling album, best-selling book. And is it film? I can't remember. Yes, it is film. And one of the comedians on it is absolutely terrified of Mr. Blobby, and it is hilarious.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
Jack Whitehall does not like Mr. Blobby.
It was very pop culture icon. And if you think about recently on social media, there was a trend of dressing in autumn like a frazzled British woman. And that's very much Bridget Jones's fashion sense. A kind of
yes, it is.
Big fluffy jumpers and tiny skirts.
Yes.
Another kind of factoid about this film is there was a big thing in the press at the time of the release that Renee Zellweger had to gain 20 pounds in order to play Bridget Jones. And they make Bridget makes a big thing in her diary about wanting to lose weight. And people made comments in the movie about her weight. Whereas we look at her and we think, she's normal size.
She's a normal size. I mean, it was the time of, what was it?
Heroin's chic.
Heroin chic. I couldn't think of the word, where people were too thin. And I understand that everyone has different body types, and some people are more naturally thin and some people are naturally larger and all this kind of stuff. But there was this massive thing about her being fat, and she's not fat. She just looks like a normal woman.
She looks nice and healthy. And you also, so there was also Hugh Grant played, I think it was his first semi-villainous role after a long run of Four Weddings and a Funeral, etc., etc., etc. Where he was the romantic ideal, and I think they played into that. Where we know that Daniel, his character, is a womanizer, but he is presented, at least at the beginning, like as the romantic option. I think. Well, let's talk about the Pride and Prejudice comparisons in a moment. But as I was watching it again this time, I very much thought that if this could very easily have been kind of a chocolate office romance with the boss story, you know, I could see that on Amazon Kindle Unlimited or whatever, kind of being a bestseller of, I work in publishing, and I started exchanging flirty emails with my boss about my skirt length, and we had a falling out, but ultimately he realised I was the love of his life, and we ended up together. And then actually Bridget starts off thinking that's going to be the story as well. Yeah.
And he is that classic, it's Pride and Prejudice. And you said loosely based. I think it's just Pride and Prejudice, but in
they say it's
Britain.
loosely. They say it is loosely based. It has a lot of the same themes and hits a lot of the key plot points, but it also diverges a lot in other ways. So let's talk about it being an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. So we have Bridget, who is, I guess, supposed to be our Lizzie Bennet.
Yes. She most definitely
has a ridiculous mother. That's one of the first things we learn about her.
Yes, she does.
Who is desperately trying to get her married off.
Yeah.
That's very Mrs. Bennet. And she has a father who is affectionate with her, but reserved.
Yeah. She loves her dad, doesn't she? But he's just a bit of an awkward sausage, really.
Played by Jim Broadbent, who we love.
Who is amazing.
So you've got a Mr. and Mrs. Bennet there. And then she doesn't have any siblings, but she does have a really strong group of friends. So she has... it's not Moaning Myrtle. You know what? The actress who plays Moaning Myrtle. Jude, played by Shirley Henderson. Shazza, played by Sally Phillips. Tom, played by James Calais. And they each kind of fit a stereotype of the kind of... It's that very early 2000s, late 90s friendship group in their 30s, go out drinking a lot.
Permanently drunk.
Quite high-flying jobs, all of them.
One's gay.
One's gay, one swears a lot, one seems to have her professional life together, but her personal life is a mess.
All the cliches, perfect.
All the cliches.
And pretty much every other word they say is a swear word. It's brilliant.
And then we have the Mr. Darcy. Mr. Mark
who is
Darcy.
Literally Mr. Darcy. Mark Fitzwilliam Darcy. When he and Bridget meet for the first time, it doesn't go well, and he insults her. Just
loudly.
like Pride and Prejudice.
Although his observations are cruel, but not necessarily false in that moment.
And it does spark her to want to change things, doesn't it? Not to justify him being rude to her, but it does make her go, right, I want to turn my life around and sort it out.
Yeah, he mentions her smoking, her drinking, kind of that she doesn't have much control over what comes out of her mouth. And also that her mum's dressed her up in a horrendous outfit.
Does he talk about her weight? I can't remember.
I cannot remember. I don't think he talks about her weight.
No, because that would be minus points for Mr. Darcy.
And this isn't the first time they've met, though. So
no,
there is some sort
she
of
ran around on his lawn naked as a 4-year-old.
Yeah, there's a childhood acquaintance. Their parents live in the same village.
Yes.
And we get this lovely opening shot of in the snow of a church and I think her parents' house is opposite the church or something like that. It's all very twee.
Yes.
Chocolate box, English countryside. But Mark is very rude and he's a barrister and he is and we're told he is divorced.
Yes.
And what the first of very ageing jokes in this movie, which is a comment Bridget's mum makes about his ex-wife being Japanese, and we're not going to talk about what that joke was because it is very bad.
Yeah, you do watch these things, don't you? And you go, nostalgia with it, and it's classic film, and all this kind of stuff, and then you go, there's loads of inappropriate jokes.
I think we're meant to find it inappropriate.
It was the noughties.
We are meant to find it inappropriate. Yeah. We're meant to go, that's who Bridget's mum is. But it has aged even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second love interest is Daniel Cleaver, who is Bridget's boss. Bridget works in publishing, and he's a notorious womanizer in many ways. And he knows Mark Darcy, and Daniel tells the story that he caught Mark sleeping with his fiancée. But it turns out later on that it's the other way round in a classic Willoughby Darcy, not Willoughby's Sense and Sensibility, Wickham. That she's got the wrong end of the stick and therefore made the mistake and made assumptions about Darcy that are not true.
Daniel is our Mr. Wickham.
Yes.
Although I'm going to say he's a womanizer, and we don't support his behaviour. Over the course of the movies, he does get a little bit better.
Yeah, I saw a clip of the most recent one that's coming out, and they seem to be friends and pals as part of it. And I think Bridget's kids refer to him as Uncle Daniel, and stuff like that. So I don't know how his character arc improves, but from the films I've seen, it doesn't particularly.
As I remember, he keeps coming back anyway. And
he's got a thing for Bridget.
And they start off with he makes a terrible HR violation.
Massively. Yeah.
He starts off by sending her an email that or some sort of message on the work messaging
instant
system,
message.
About her skirt
early
being
noughties.
Absent. It's not even that short a skirt to begin with.
No. Yes, the skirt is called off sick to work and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we kind of wanted to talk a bit about this in that, at the time it seemed very flirty and lovely and all that kind of thing. But it is, the casual sexism, which I don't actually like as a phrase because there's nothing casual about it. It's just sexism in the workplace that women experience where, people feel able to send messages like that to their employees, and you panic and fluster because you're like, well, this is my boss. What can I do about it? Do I just have to and try and walk away from it? Or as Bridget decides to do, she takes it as flirty and flirts back.
With Daniel, but actually throughout the movie there are men who are being skeevy. So there's the Uncle Greg or whatever, who
he's creepy,
grabs a bum
all the time,
and you'd imagine that her parents would be like, "Don't touch our daughter like that, you pervert." But
but it's the early noughties,
It's the
so you
early
just go,
noughties.
oh, that's just so-and-so, that's what they
Yeah.
do. And you roll with it whilst going,
Yeah.
that's not cool.
Yeah. And then Mr. Fitzherbert, Mr. Tits Pervert.
Yes.
That's one of the best. I think that is, if you take anything from this movie, that is one of the best, most memorable bits. That she's got this little nickname for him, which she ends up announcing in public by accident.
Well, she doesn't, does she? She gets away with it, doesn't she? Because she's in her head, she's got to introduce him, hasn't she? And has to say Fitzherbert. But in her head, it's going tits pervert, tits pervert, tits pervert. But she does say the right name, doesn't she?
I thought she ended up saying Tits Pervert. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, she's professional, I think.
No, because she makes a mess at evening. I believe. Anyway,
I can't remember.
She and Daniel start having a very inappropriate office romance, and she starts imagining their future wedding, where there's banter about how it all started off with inappropriate work messages.
Yeah.
And she leans into, she's like, oh, if he's going to say my skirt is too short, I'm going to wear an even shorter skirt and a see-through top.
Yeah.
Which, to be honest, she just looks uncomfortable in them. And that was my impression. She doesn't look like she could walk in that skirt.
But I do kind of love that in some ways for her. She's like, right, you're going to be well, for her it's flirting, but part of me, we going to college, we had that lecture, didn't we, where we were told we shouldn't wear red lipstick at communion because we might distract people. And that made me go, I'm going to wear red lipstick so much more in services and stuff like that. Because actually, I saw this brilliant video the other day that was a pastor in America who was so angry about the way that women have been treated in the church. And he was talking about how we've put it upon women to dull themselves down and not had men have to take account for their responsibility in this. So, women, you've got to wear long skirts, and not gone, men, you shouldn't be checking out women's asses. Yeah. And that shouldn't be distracting you from worship. It was brilliant. So she kind of leans into it and goes, do you know what? I'm gonna wear this inappropriate outfit to work.
and she gets so confident in this romance until it all falls apart.
Yeah, but he brings out all the worst traits in her in some way, doesn't he? And lies and is just, she has fun, but it's not a long-term thing. I don't know whether he thinks it's a long-term thing.
He doesn't, and I mean, he says when he has his letting her down conversation, that they're both two people struggling to commit, or something like that. Yeah. And that he. Yeah, and he sort of then is immediately engaged to this person he's known from the New York office. And he really makes Bridget feel cheap. Yeah. Which in very similar to Legally Blonde, when
such a great film,
and the initial breakup in Legally Blonde, where it's like, I want to,
because I'm too blonde.
I want a Hillary, not a Marilyn, or whatever it was. That sense of, you're the fun time girl, and it's really not helped by it happens the same day that she, for some reason in their village, they have a tarts and Vicars party.
Yes, but it's a tarts and Vicars party where the dress code gets changed last minute, and it's Bridget, her dad, and I think there's one other person who doesn't get the memo that it's changed, and it's the pervy uncle who forgot to tell Bridget to not come dressed as a tart.
Which, like, have you ever heard of a tarts and Vicars party before this? This is the only time I've come across it.
I mean, I've heard of it lots, but I've never actually been to one. And I if I was invited to one, I would have, maybe I'd try and combine the two.
A tarty vicar. But
Be a
again,
tarty
it's that,
vicar.
it's that sexism where you've got the women are tarts and the men are vicars. And is it sort of suggesting that vicars are pervy? Or, like, it is a really interesting...
concept as a party.
And throughout the movie, there is this sense of being a woman is existing in a space where you are sexualized, and you either play into that, or you do everything you can to fight against it.
Well, let's talk about that then in our context of working in ministry. That actually, I think there is that kind of sexualization of women clergy, or women called to some kind of vocation. Like I think about nuns and that kind of thing. That sexy nuns is a thing, and the unattainable becoming this thing. What experience do we have in our work, and how can we make it a short podcast without us going through every experience of where we've experienced sexism as part of our jobs as vicars?
So there's the microaggressions which you encounter just as being a young woman, I think, in the world, such as a hand placed on the small of your back. Like, where you're like, please don't touch me. Or people calling you by pet names in a professional context. People asking you when you're going to get married. All of that sort of
like
stuff.
Bridget gets all the time. How's your love life, Bridge?
Then you have the more blatant stuff, such as someone fixating on you as a romantic ideal. Or finding your, because our public information, our contact details are out there. People using that to approach you romantically rather than professionally. Generally being... People treat you as a young woman first, I think, sometimes, and a vicar second. I've had people who... won't see me as an authority figure. They like me a lot, but they won't see me as an authority figure. And you either spend your life fighting that or you work around it. What about you?
I mean, all of the above, really. And there's the comments of, if I was 30 years younger, and thinking, you'd still be, there'd still be a large age gap between us. And just thinking, there's so many things that are said that you think, in any other workplace or professional capacity, like, you just couldn't say that. So why is it okay to say to your vicar? And I mean, I can take banter and a bit of flirty banter, and I can give as much as I get, but there are definitely times that I think, like I've said earlier, about where you kind of laugh things off, where you feel really uncomfortable. And you have to learn where your boundaries are and where you tell people to just back off. Because you're a public figure. I was talking to my area dean just before this call about something completely different. And we were talking about we don't have the right to reply. So, like, if, for example, in a school, if a parent complains about a child or a teacher or something like that, the head doesn't have the chance to go to the local paper and say, well, actually, this is what's gone on and all this kind of stuff. And in the same way, we as clergy don't have that right to reply and go, well, here's some information you need to know about this person, and this is what they've been doing, and it's totally inappropriate, and you can't snap. And when you do, you get in big trouble. And it's really, really difficult. And there's definitely things that I've stopped doing in ministry because of how I've been treated. Like, I don't wear my hair in certain ways because of having, like, my braids pulled and stuff like that. And I don't wear certain things anymore because of how I've been treated wearing them and that sort of thing. And it's just rubbish.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
It's not.
Ah!
And then you also have people who the church has told us we have to let people refuse our ministry. So I think one of the most painful experiences I had in curacy was just before I got priested. And I had to sit down with a couple of women who wouldn't receive communion from me. And who, you know, my training incumbent, you know, we had a conversation with them, but actually in public ministry, if someone doesn't want to receive ministry from you, you just have to accept it. As much as you want, you can try to challenge them, but ultimately the church lands on their side. That, you know, when we signed up to Mutual Flourishing, which we had to, which isn't mutual and it's not flourishing for anyone, but when we signed up to that as part of our training, it's essentially saying people, you know, you just have to deal with it.
Yeah. And it's the lack of accountability that I find frustrating about it. And yeah, it's all difficult. And I think going back to Bridget Jones again, you know, she's a single woman, and we've both experienced being a single woman in ministry as well. And the things that people feel they're allowed to say and comment on. And sometimes they are doing it out of genuine love and are trying to, you know, they view the best way that you can live your life is with a partner, with children, in that kind of security. And that's just what they've been brought up with. And so they desperately want that for you. And you understand that some of it comes out of a place of love and caring. But other times you just think, do you know what? You don't know. Actually, do you know what? I might not want to marry anyone. Quite like my own company. And I don't want to have to decide anyone else's work is part of this. Or do you know what? If you're in a relationship and they're asking when are you going to have kids and all of this kind of thing, and actually you're struggling to conceive, or it's just painful and you don't have that right of reply.
Yeah, to be honest, so the last time I was asked, it was at a funeral reception where someone asked me, so are you married? Do you have children? I sort of almost, when I came back and I laughed my way through it, and then the person had gone on to say, oh, you have a dog, don't you? She's usually the love of your life.
Yes, she is.
I was thinking myself after, you know, I'm so tempted next time someone asks me if I'm married to respond, Lord, no.
Yeah.
Oh, God forbid. Or something like that.
Yes, you should, just to see what people's reaction are. Yes.
Why would
Be
I want
cheeky.
that? Why would I inflict that on myself? Which obviously, I don't think marriage is terrible as an institution. I just want to stop being asked about it.
Known as the marriage-hating vicar.
Marriage-hating vicar. Was it interesting with him, to bring it back to Bridget Jones? So we actually have, one of the biggest people who are pushing Bridget the most to get married is Bridget's mum. And actually, she goes through a journey herself in this movie.
Oh, yes.
She has a crisis, a sort of an identity crisis, where she realises that she's dedicated her life to being a mum and a wife. And there's nothing to show for it. So she runs off with...
is it Julian?
With Julian, who runs a home shopping channel. And I've got to say, I did not get straight vibes from Julian.
No, absolutely not. She's a beard.
But anyway, they ran off and started parading around as a couple, going around to friends' houses in the village for dinner.
Yeah.
Leaving Bridget's dad, bless him, in a pit of sadness.
Yes.
But she sort of eventually, she realises that this man she's run off with is ridiculous. And she goes back to Bridget's dad, and you can sort of see they have a very serious conversation about, you know, can you take me back? And I've been silly, and I think she has a realisation that actually you know, there's that balance of the romantic escape, which is what she was longing for and had missed. And you know, in her conversation with Bridget's dad at the end, she says, "You used to be, you know, I used to not be able to keep you away from me," and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there's something about, and she sort of then she backs off from Bridget a bit as well in terms of forcing her to matching her up.
And this is the problem where if you just put women as their only jobs is to get married and have babies, then, and you take away kind of every other bit of their identity, then this is what happens. That people go, do you know, well, what worth and value do I have? And that is not to slag off or disregard anyone who actually, that is what they feel called to do, and that is what they want to be. They want to be a wife and a mum, because they are really, really valuable, wonderful things. But to put your only value on that, and that's the only ability you have, then that just disregards so much more that women can do. And I love that speech in Little Women. It was the most recent adaptation that's got Saoirse Ronan in it, and she does this amazing speech about what value women have, and they've got brains, and they've got hearts, and they've got minds, and they can do all these things, and yet we're put in these boxes to do. And she's got so much of it, and she can't articulate it. And we do that in the church, in certain churches all the time, where, you know, your only value is on whether you've got a husband, definitely a husband, and whether you have children. And if you don't have those things, then you are inferior and something's wrong with you. And that's just so wrong.
And it messes with your head. So if we think about training for ordination, both of us in our 20s, where actually it was just made way bigger than it should have been. This obsession with the conversation of, well, you know, no one will want to marry you, or, oh, you know, get married and have kids before you get ordained, or how are you going to balance being a vicar and having kids and being a mum, or, you know, as soon as you become a vicar, no one ever wants to date you again, or all of that. The obsession with whether or not we would realise our true calling to be wives and mothers. And whether becoming vicars was hobbling our ability to realise this. It became an obsession where you're like, well, because you're telling me this is the most important thing, I'm going to believe it's the most important thing. And I'm going to worry about it a lot more than if you'd never told me, you know, that, oh, if you're a vicar, you won't be a good mum, or if you're a vicar, you won't get married, blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't have even considered it as an issue.
I wonder if Bridget, if like her parents had been more encouraging and going, oh, you know, how's your career going? How's your stuff with your friends? What hobbies are you into? Whether she would, because I think Bridget wants love.
Yeah.
She wants to find a partner, but actually the focus solely being on that. And like there's the dinner party where she's the only single person there. And she says, you know, there's that, why are there so many women in their 30s who are single? And she's like, well, we've got scales everywhere. So, it's...
She's treated like an oddity. And so there is a big turning point in the movie where, after she's ended things with Daniel, she sort of realises that she wants to properly change and actually focus on her career, on sort of separating herself, getting herself out of this toxic work environment, especially because one of Daniel's comments in breaking up was about how she swanned about playing around with press releases or whatever. So he does not take her seriously professionally. And she decides to move into what was definitely at the time seen as a much more lucrative and prestigious career. So to move into TV.
Yeah.
And she does, she owns that, again, the reason she ends up getting the job she gets is because of sexism, because she ends up having slept with her boss and needing to get out of the workplace.
Yeah.
And her new boss is like, well, we don't fire anyone for sleeping with their boss here. Or whatever.
Oh, gosh.
But she eventually finds her niche. And actually, she decides to take risks to break out of this mould that she's let herself be cast into.
Yeah.
To be more independent, to speak, to stand up for herself more. So this is the dinner party moment is very much, that's the Lady Catherine moment where she's sort of being grilled and made uncomfortable. And then we have Darcy making a declaration to her. And he says, I like you just as you are. Which is but he also is very condescending to her. He kind of lists all the negative characteristics.
Yeah.
And so she's a lot more restrained than Elizabeth Bennet is. But she's strong in herself. Like, she doesn't go off on one and attack him. She's just like, well, aside from all these things that were wrong with me, you like me as I am, do you? And or whatever. And then she says, you've been rude to me from the moment we've met, etc., etc. And she walks off and she owns it. And then they kind of, they have these. He gives her a career opportunity of an interview with someone.
Yeah.
From a court case he's holding, and then there's this moment where it's a wedding anniversary for his parents. She kind of makes a speech. She has her moment to put us, which is, I think, one of the big differences between her and Elizabeth Bennet is that she actually
she declares herself more,
and she makes a risk. Whereas I love Elizabeth Bennet, but she does sort of just let people do things around her to an extent.
Yeah.
And obviously that is part of the time period and the trappings, where it would be extremely improper for a woman to declare herself a romantic interest, etc., etc. But Bridget does this, and she's in the process of making a speech where she realises that it's not working.
She uses the same line, doesn't she? Well, she makes the kind of little speech just to him, and also, says all the flaws that he has, and that he should question the length of his sideburns and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then says that I like you just as you are. And then there's the speech that Darcy's dad gives to celebrate their 50 years of marriage, and he talks about his son and probably getting another in-law, and she shouts no in front of everyone, and she manages to, she tries to recover, even though people think she's drunk, and says, it's such a shame for England to lose one of our top people, top person really. And it's clear from looking at Mark's face that he's like, oh, she's talking about me. Where everyone else is like, Bridget is mad.
And so she kind of then retitles her diary, which had been called Bridget Jones's Diary, to the Diary of Bridget Jones, Spinster and Lunatic.
Yes.
And the diary itself is almost a character in the book, because the diary is who Bridget is talking to in narration throughout the movie, and it starts out being very sort of, this is my weight, this is how many cigarettes I've had today, this is how much I've drunk today. And it sort of becomes a lot more than emotional processing and a confessional. And at the end, when Mark comes back from New York, he realises he has to be with her, whatever. He accidentally reads her diary, and there's this kind of moment where he goes off to buy a new diary, but she thinks he's left because he's hideously offended by what she's written.
Yes. And she runs out into the street in her leopard print pants. No, not leopard print. Tiger print
knickers. Yeah.
Tiny knickers.
They're not. I don't think they're actually that tiny, but
they're sexy knickers. She changes out of her big girl knickers to her tiny ones and runs out in the snow in a cardi, a vest and her pants. She does put shoes on to chase him down. It's all very romantic and lovely, and they kiss in the snow and it's beautiful, and he wraps her in the coat because she's just stood there in her pants. And that's the end.
That's the end. One part we didn't mention was that there is a standoff between Mark and
they have
and
fisticuffs.
Daniel. They have a fight. A fact I know about this is that it wasn't scripted. It wasn't. I mean, it was. They deliberately didn't script a fight or get stunt people in to
really?
to choreograph it because they wanted it to look naff. Like a real fight.
And it does.
And it looks so bad. My favourite is actually one of my favourite parts of the movie is where
where they're fighting.
Where the friend runs into the restaurant saying, "Fight! There's a real fight!" and there's just the joy in her friends' faces and all the people who are standing by who are just egging on this terrible.
These gentlemen are duelling over my affections.
And it doesn't end well for anyone.
No.
That is Bridget
Jones
Diary. And I think it was a very big moment in British film.
Yeah.
It's obviously there have been sequels. I don't feel like the hype has been maintained quite so much. I don't feel like Bridget Jones's Diary is as in the cultural spotlight as it used to be.
Do you think that's because it's been 24 years since it's come out?
Well, yeah, and the kind of the age group it was originally aimed at have aged. You know, the character has aged.
I mean, I was 10 when it came out.
yeah. So we can watch the original Bridget Jones' Diary and we're like, oh yeah, we see it differently because we're now the same age, a little bit older than her. But like I said, I think at the beginning I said I've always found it a bit cringe. Like in the second movie, Bridget gets framed for drug trafficking.
Oh yeah, she does, doesn't she?
And the third movie it just feels like
she gets pregnant.
Of the same relationship issues are brought up again and again, where Mark is really emotionally restrained.
Yeah.
And so Bridget doubts that he actually cares for her. And Daniel pops up to offer
ruin
this
things.
Sense of he's someone who is emotionally engaged and flirty and fun in a way that Mark isn't. Mark is steady and he's serious and he loves Bridget, but he struggles to express it, and he also wrestles with her frivolity and her ridiculousness. He simultaneously loves her ridiculousness and wishes she would behave.
I think he can't engage in it because he's so serious. He can't do the frivolous, and so that's something he struggles with. But it is Pride and Prejudice set in the 90s.
Yeah.
And so I have a question for you.
Okay.
Have you read many adaptations of Jane Austen that are modern day ones?
I wouldn't say I've read, but I watched the Lizzie Bennet Diaries.
Ah, yes.
And I think a lot of...
And Emma. Did you watch the Emma one?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
I think I've read a lot of stuff which are very inspired... modern romances which are inspired by Pride and Prejudice as an archetype of...
Yeah.
Initially we hate each other.
Enemies to lovers. Classic trope.
We got off on the wrong foot.
Juicy misunderstandings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question to you then is, if we were to take a Jane Austen novel and set it in modern times with a bit of a church influence with it, which one would we pick and what would be some of the story?
Oh,
I'm a little bit tempted by Mansfield Park
yeah.
because one of the cruxes for it is, I mean, we'd have to make sure they weren't cousins because that's a bit weird.
Yeah.
But one of the key things is that, his name's gone from my head. Who's the romantic? It's Fanny and Edmund. Edmund wants to become a vicar. And so I feel like you could work with that into...
You could.
Yeah.
I mean, so my favourite Austen, aside from Pride and Prejudice, is Persuasion.
Me too!
I would love to see a modern adaptation of Persuasion.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would bring the church into it.
No.
But well, actually, no, the way you would bring the church into it is you put, what's the name of the main character? It's really bad. It's one of my favourites, but their names are
Captain Wentworth or Anne? Anne Elliot.
I think you'd put Anne, actually, would be for a really religious family, and that's why they would have objected to Wentworth.
Oh, interesting.
And that he didn't fit whatever their ideal was for her partner.
Yeah.
Either because he was the wrong denomination, or maybe not a churchgoer at all, or
a different religion.
Or he would support Anne in her aspirations to be more than just a housewife or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think then having them encountering later when she's managed to break off from her family a bit more, would be interesting.
There is and it'd be nice if actually they're properly older, as opposed to I'm 27 and a spinster. You're like, are you, love? But there was I think it's a Nicholas Sparks one that is that kind of childhood lovers, something goes wrong, and then much later on they meet again and kind of rekindle.
This is the second chance romance, which I quite like, is that due to some sort of... I don't like them where there's been some actual wrongdoing, like where one of them cheated or abandoned the other, but actually where there was, due to them being very
juicy
young,
misunderstandings,
they fell apart. Or it's a bit like Sweet Home Alabama.
I
really...
Great film.
I sort of... That sense of, there was that youthful romance and they kind of separated. And they meet again and realise that they still love each other.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it's already been done then. Never mind.
And the thing about Austen is, like, she is such a master of the craft.
Yeah.
A lot of modern romance kind of has built upon the foundation she laid.
Yeah.
Have
you watched the BBC Miss Austen?
I have not.
What did you make of that? You haven't?
I haven't, no.
So it's from the perspective of Cassandra Austen, so Jane's sister, and it's after Jane has died, and it talks about the letters of Jane Austen. There's a lot of it, and one of the things that happened is Jane wrote loads of letters, but Cassandra burnt a load of her correspondence. And it's kind of imagined that correspondence, and it's really interesting to see a kind of different side of Jane Austen as part of, I mean, there's bits that are fact as part of it, and there's other bits that are totally made up, but yeah, I would recommend watching Miss Austen.
Yeah, because there's stuff about Jane Austen's life which it's very, very interesting once you know how that is reflected in her books. Like, so she has her moment where she very almost marries the inappropriate romantic option.
You need to watch.
Chooses not to.
Yeah, you need to watch because it's an interesting way that they give a reason for why she doesn't do it. It's good. It's good. Enjoyed it. Very nice. Anyway, I think we should draw to a close there.
Yeah, so that was Bridget Jones's Diary. Obviously, there is a new movie in the quartet about the boy in which Bridget is much older than we see her in the first film. She has children who are, I think, of a primary school age now.
I think so, yeah.
And Mark has passed away.
Yeah.
Sad. So it'll be, I'm tempted to watch it. I'll probably watch it not in the cinema, but when it's released for rental at home. Because I sort of want to see kind of what role Daniel plays. Does Bridget find someone new? Because I think there's something about the school's as her kid's teacher or something.
Oh, is it? Ooh.
From the trailers I've seen, I think there's something about her volunteering to help out on a school excursion, and I think it's something to do with a crush she has on her son's teacher, or a crush her son's teacher has on her, or I don't know.
Yeah. Has she done the appropriate DBS checks? That's what I'm most interested in.
She thinks there's something else where she thinks a barista is flirting with her.
Yeah, there's a younger man and all this stuff. So
obviously all the questions being asked will all be about her rediscovering her identity outside of being Mark's wife and being a widow and learning how to date again, etc., etc.
Yeah. So we hope you've enjoyed this discussion that we've had about Bridget Jones's Diary, going back to the original and tying it in with our own experiences of sexism in the workplace and Jane Austen and all these different things that we love talking about, as always. Let us know what you've thought about this episode. Have you seen the next one? What do you think of it? And if there's any other films, you've mentioned Legally Blonde, and I now really want to do an episode on Legally Blonde. Let us know if there's anything else that you think we should be watching, and we will do our best to start watching. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vicars Watch Dibley. Thank you to Nat for editing our ramblings.
Any opinions expressed are our own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Church of England or any other organisation with which we are affiliated.
If you like our podcast, leave us a review, follow us on social media and share it with your friends. And, as always, bless you for listening.
My friend stole my diary a month ago and suddenly died a few days later. My thoughts are with his family.
Dark, but I like it.